Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Send me and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. So when you see the title of this, I'm going to be honest with you and tell you that the title is broader than what I can, what I'm going to actually cover is much broader than what I can put into one title. Let me tell you all that first so you understand. Secondly, in order to properly do you justice in covering this topic, you have to know that the definitions have changed. Now, some of you are older than me. BGS will remember about 3 definitions for all of these words. He can remember how the definition changed, I'm pretty sure, for the word bullying. To bully someone meant physically harm them, pretty much for entertainment. And if not to do that, then it meant to threaten to harm somebody. It was not just insulting someone. That just meant you said something they didn't like. And that alone was not considered dangerous. When he was coming up, I'm pretty sure, because he's roughly my parents' age, and then when I was coming up, it was the same thing. When I began to teach, then my middle school students, 7th graders at that time, in the 2010s, why did I say 10,010s? But in the 2010s, when I began to teach, they had a different definition. It didn't mean the same thing to them that it meant. When BGS and when my generation were coming up, it now it just meant insulting somebody. And well, that's a soft that's a definition a softie would give it. So with that being said, it's changed a lot. The definition for punk also changed. In BGS's day, it meant a sissy. It meant you actually liked your own gender the way you're supposed to like the opposite gender. I don't think they applied it to women that were that way, but they certainly applied it to males that were that way. Booty banditry. That's what a punk was. It didn't mean anything nicer than that. Then there was nerd. Now, when his generation was coming up, apparently it wasn't used in all parts of the United States, because I've met people of that generation from different parts of the country, and then that word was not used much in some of their locales, and in others it was. But they had other words like egghead. But then it got worse. There were when I came up, by that point, it was an epithet and it was dangerous. It was dehumanizing. And the problem was that it would precede bullying according to the definition that used to exist for bullying, according to its old definition. And that was, if you were white and whites called you a nerd, then they were going to bully you. And if you were black and black folk called you a nerd, they were going to bully you. And I mean, that included physical harm and the threats thereof too. It wasn't just a name. So, and as you all know, in our community, the problem is that it doesn't really take, because we don't like nuance, so it doesn't really take much to actually be considered to be an egghead, abnormal. And see, back then, nerd was a word used in most of the English-speaking world, and even some Spanish-speaking countries, but it was simply translated as nerdo. But now it exists in Amharic and Arabic, and I mean, they have their own translations, their own words for it at this point. And I have to tell a lot of the locals here, using the local translation for it, that the proper way for them to excel in what they want to excel in is to be exactly what they don't want to be, which is a dafur. I have to tell them, you don't get to walk around here swaggering keeping cool pose like what you would want to do. Because they had that same issue here, though a bit less, it's not as exaggerated as it was for us. You in the Black manosphere have generally begun to call this out. You pretty much called out the old paradigm, and you've begun to say, we will not respect it. We don't like it. We're not going to respect this paradigm. You're not going to lay this on us anymore. You can no longer use these things to try to guilt us into allowing you to share in the benefits of our productivity after you have made it very plain and very clear that you cannot respect what it takes to get these benefits. You don't respect the productivity, but you want its benefits. Now, I remember when I was a little boy reading the Tarzan books, and when Tarzan finally met some Europeans that were traipsing through Africa exploring, and he had begun to pick up English, he began to say to them, you know, when we would travel through parts of the jungle where there was little food, little to eat, the apes would ridicule me for taking some food with us for that journey. But my mother was happy to share that food with me while we were in the journey, and I never understood why she would consistently be this way. Why are you carrying this ahead of time now? Oh, a few days later, yeah, I'm hungry. Can I split some with you? What? He'd only share with the one that he considered to be his mom, the she-ape that raised him. This when I'm a little boy reading this, and this is written by a racist. Now, we're not apes. I mean, some people say biologically human beings are one of the great apes. I'm not talking about a biological. Okay, we're not non-human primates. But there's a part of us that tends to think we are. And all of this culture or this killture is born out of this conception. Now, do you think that we, coming out of the continent where you've got multiple non-human primate species, two of them counted as great apes, that we can't tell the difference between them and us, despite the similarity in DNA and anatomy? Do you think that we can never tell the difference? All of a sudden, we get to the Americas by force, and we start behaving exactly like our enemies have determined that we are, which is ape-like, less human. It's the exact same goddamn thing. Edgar Rice Burroughs, a racist, wrote this stereotype about a non-human primate, a fictitious species. And then he turned around and sold that book, and it was later made into movies and all this other stuff. He wrote this, I think, in the 1890s. But then but see, here's where it's funny, because it's like, now you fast forward to today, and as you know, 1890s, we were still building certain things that were going to be burned later, and some of our settlements had already been burned to the ground. But we were builders. And then fast forward to today, and it seems like somewhere in the 80s we became a little bit lax in the discipline, but we still had some of that righteousness. And then come 89, we just dropped it, and we just went straight to NWA. And Ice Cube quickly divorced himself from that sort of thing, and he went into nationalism and pro-blackness and black consciousness and black awareness. He went in a few steps, because he saw the damage it was doing. But by that time, you couldn't get black folks to buy into anything conscious. They may like it, but you couldn't get them to buy into anything conscious. He was about as conscious as it could go, and that was because he got his foot in the door with gangster rap. N19killture. That's the first thing we have to understand. Our self-conception has been ruined over time, but now, from 89, it's been very, very, very successful. It has enjoyed levels of success. That effort by enemies has enjoyed levels of success unknown before, unprecedented, but there it is. I'm not saying precedented as in unruled, but unprecedented, meaning record breaking or record setting. So with that being said, I'm proud of you in the Black manosphere for finally coming along and saying, in order to be a black man, you don't have to be a savage. That real masculinity is manhood, not just machismo. And that's why it is that when we get these dating coaches talking about how to get, how to bit gitches, I can't go along with that. Because see, we're sitting up here putting too much effort into getting the wrong ones. And the thing is that when you get these guys to understand that even if they cannot leave where they live, that at the very least, such broads exist and that the women that they're around are not normal, then the next thing is easy to teach them to excuse themselves from this perceived necessity of bidding gitches. No, you don't have to, because where you live, it's not your fault you were born here. It ain't your fault this is where you're allowed to live legally. So guess what? You don't need to do that. You actually should not, because they're toxic, because they're that bad. Don't pursue them. Something's wrong with you if you pursue them. They're not normal. That's why you get stressed out trying to get them and then trying to keep these bitches. It is not stressful because something's wrong with you. It's because something's wrong with them. All you got to do is look at older cultures that have been stable and see how those women treat their men. And that's where you can see the comparison and contrast that you need to see. Starting a family for them is not some impossible, lofty goal. So the conversations that we're now having are difficult, largely because this is a conversation that is occurring across generations of black men. And a lot of black women, they don't know what to do. Even a lot of so-called good black women don't really know what to do about this, because what they're saying is, wait a minute, how are you about to redefine manhood at this point? How are you about to redefine masculinity? Because we're used to being able to tell you what we validate as real manhood. Either with the tongue, not giving head, just, complimenting you, or with the draws. And those two ain't the same. We'll call you a real man because you spend on women you barely know. But then we'll turn around and fuck niggas we barely know to tell them that we've accepted that they're really men. And it'll be because of dumb things like a little swag, some tats, height, a few muscles. Yeah, they'll do that. And that's why this clip that we can see is now going viral, where this woman is talking to this guy at a table, and he tells you he's got 8. I think he said he got, I don't know how many kids, I think 8 baby mamas, and she's like, I'm not going to blame you for doing it. I mean, look at your height, your genetics. We need that. These bitches are still sitting up here talking about whether or not a man has a right to have kids, not based on whether he's married and responsible, but based on whether he's tall and would make he can breed good babies for the auction block. These bitches are still trying to breed niggas for a system that does not exist anymore. It has changed. You could say that it's been replaced with something that serves the same purpose, but the auction block plantation system does not exist in the form that we see in the history textbooks. And these bitches are still trying to breed niggas for that same damn plantation. Strong of body and weak of mind. Oh, it's okay for sisters to think. Hyenas will do that. Then they'll turn around and they'll put that notion forward. It's okay for them to think, not you, but then they'll turn around and not think. And many halfway lionesses will put that notion forward, but they'll think and they'll continue to think, and they're always plotting. And in other times, they're actually trying to plan responsibly, but they still don't want you thinking too damn much, thinking too deeply. Even lionesses at times don't want you to be what they consider to be too much of a nerd. They simply, what it is that they don't want your brain too active. So your ability to think about what it is that they're doing, to think about where they're going with something, is enough for them to turn around and say that you were the exact same as somebody who can't communicate and say hello to other people on the street, but his brain runs at 100 miles an hour. Like you're unbalanced or something. Neurodivergent. That's what it is that they're trying to get you to think. If you are thinking past just how I'm gonna go get the next puss, then lionesses will do that if they're not careful. And they turn around and act like, well, you're unbalanced. Turn around and say that if you're one of those dudes that says, look, I like to start off as friends because then I know her. I know what we're getting into. Now, I don't think that really makes it, I don't think that helps much, but let's say you do think so. Or you think it would help you and you put that notion forward. Now, as a Muslim, I would say, no, don't do that. But let's say you're coming from your own belief system and hers. Neither of you share the faith that I share. What is her objection to that? Her objection to that is just, damn it, you're thinking too much and you're going to see through some shit. So in reality, the whole dichotomy in between the so-called nerd and the real nigga is a dichotomy that winds up serving neither archetype, but it serves Boom Shika and Bon Quisha, Sophista Ratchet Sapphire. And to a certain extent, though lesser, it'll even serve lionesses if they're willing to delve into boneyard activities every so often. Shout out to Crimson Cure for the terminology and the vocabulary to explain that. So yeah, I want you guys to keep this in mind. The definitions are changing, and this makes the conversation a bit difficult, but we have to remember that the definitions have changed. So if we remember that, how they changed across the generations, then we can better have the conversation, because frankly, in all honesty, one of the reasons why the Black manosphere is having debates about being a nerd versus not being one is because of how we define that term. Some of us see the nerd as being an egghead who can't say hello. He just has to be socially awkward. He just has to be. And Game Changer has given BGS the impression, maybe rightly so, that that's how he views it. And BGS has actually taken on the definition of a nerd as not being quite that extreme, just brainy. It doesn't mean you can't get along with folks, you can't socialize with them. It just means your brain's running at 100 miles an hour. You study, you think, you learn, you remember, and you can turn around and produce some results from it too later on, hopefully. That is what the difference tends to be. We're not going to have an easy discussion until the vocabulary is generally agreed upon, but we do have to understand that the dichotomy that we are facing, well, we the Black manosphere right about our stance regarding this dichotomy. So we're coming out of a community in which the Bonquishas, the Sapphires, and the single moms don't look at men through nuance, and they intentionally don't do that because they have custody of the boys, so they know if they refuse to see men through nuance, they can raise the boys to not see themselves with nuance. So the boys coming up at the hands of these single moms will see it two ways. You a real buck Negro that's out there on a football field, bowling ninjas over. Maybe You're on the basketball court, faking folk out, making them trip over themselves while you fly over their heads and slam dunk with your nuts in their face. Those are the ways you can be, a real nick, or you can just tote guns, sell drugs, get some tats, get in dumb fights over dumb stuff, all this stuff. Anything that's either a very, very, very low chance of you making a living off of it, like the sports, or something like it'll be something like the self-destructive, the gang activity. And those are the ways that you're allowed, according to these single moms, these boom shikas and bonquishas. And this is even before they become moms at all, single or otherwise. As Edward Allen Anderson, the Reverend Brother Pastor Deacon Dr. Hurricane Edward Allen Anderson, has stated when preaching to the New Greater Zion Valley, Precious Lamb, O Lord, hold my mule while I shout. Golden Monument, Hope, Faith, Tabernacle, Holy Bright Morning Star, Incorporated, has said, he's told the congregation that many single moms are actually such before they become moms, before they conceive their first, because the ideas they have are already there. And so with that being said, look, man, we're going to have to come to, in order to discuss it, we're going to have to either change the vocabulary, or we're going to have to agree to what the vocabulary means, or we're going to have to specify if we're using the old or the new definition for some of the same vocabulary. That's what we're going to have to do. We can no longer afford to just sit around and just throw the terms out there and hope that nobody understands it according to a different level or extremity based on a generation. What we're really getting into here, and when you hear me propose some of these terms, the reason I propose them is so that you can spread them so that others can have an easier time discussing them. And that's why I do it. I don't throw new terms out there so that I can have a catchphrase and people can say, oh yeah, man, Jet Black came up with this. That's not why. I mean, I appreciate it when I get the credit. Shout out to Contractor. He gave me credit for the term Westernisha. Shout out to him. He's cooking. But the thing is that I put these terms out there to make it easier for you to have productive discussions that actually are going to be life-changing for people who hear the recordings and the playbacks later on, or who are sitting listening to the live while it is live. That's why I'm doing that. Itness, niggerilla, these terms I came up with. Intentionally dysfunctional negative stereotype. I came up with that to make it easier for you to talk about that particular archetype. I haven't used nerd that much because which definition would you understand when I say it? I've used responsible men because everybody that's responsible is not super bookish. They're responsibly educated, much as they know they need to be, but they're not all super bookish. And I would tell you, if you're a person who hates to read, that's fine. You can hate it, but if you're a man who will not read, damn it, you ain't gonna learn. One of my worst students, nice guy, but he was just one of the worst students. He said, I hate to read last semester. And he said it with pride in front of his classmates. He didn't really say it with pride. He wasn't truly bragging. He just said, I don't like to read. I hate it. But none of his classmates said anything to him about how it can help and how it's necessary. And that was a sign to me right then and there. Oh my God, these niggas might fail. And 23 out of 23 wound up failing, and I didn't fail them. So keep in mind, I didn't mark 2 of that. 50% of the grades, I didn't grade them. Others did. Keep that in mind. And by the way, I found out actually that I had made a mistake in the way that I set up the rubric that the AI was going to use. I found out I made a mistake with that. I set the rubric up that the AI was going to use to grade the essays, and I put one of the mistakes in the wrong column, which caused them to get credit for the mistake instead of losing points for it. They still failed. I found that out. Can you imagine? They failed miserably. Only one of them managed to just creep by on the final exam and then on the exit exam. Only one. Ironically, he was the worst. He was the one that he was the one that said I wasn't explaining English. He said this to the president. Lied. When I catch that little nigga, I'm going to give him a piece of my mind and shake him up a little bit. I'm going to grab him and say, hey, man, if you took the test enough times and passed it, you passed. As long as I don't find out you cheated, we good. But you're going to go back to that president. You're going to tell him, you know what, I lied about one thing. He did explain it. I just wasn't always there. And I didn't pay attention, and I played on my phone, and I didn't take notes either. But he did explain it. You're going to go back and you're going to tell him, I'm going to beat your ass. That's what I'm going to say to him. Because I don't play those games with anybody, and you shouldn't either. But also the thing to understand, guys, is that getting back to the main topic, we have to keep in mind that we cannot afford to understand these terms in the ways that Boom Shika and Bonquisha want us to understand them. We cannot afford that because that is detrimental. They don't understand them properly, and they're not going to try. They some bigger niches, man. They're genocidal, suicidal, race disloyal, Ku Klux Klanish, KK Keishas. Shout out to AC for that. And they want you to view masculinity through this false dichotomy that is devoid of nuance. That's why the hell they want it. And see, I'm gonna tell y'all straight. It's kind of like this. Some people used to think that deer in India were stupid because they were always skittish, but a lion could get up real close on them, and they'd look in that direction and they wouldn't see him. People used to think that for a while, and then people later on, it came to light that their eyes were not designed to see orange. They could see greens, but not orange. And so therefore, the tigers didn't look orange to them. They didn't, literally, the tigers looked the same as the surrounding brush. Their stripes were visible, but they blended into the background because their orange looked green to the deer. And that's why it was like that. That's why these tigers could get up on them. And it's the langur monkeys oftentimes that sound the warning call to let the deer know, you know what, yeah, you might smell something or you might feel strange. Yes, there is a tiger nearby. We can see him because we can see orange. So we can see the difference between the orange in his coat and the green of the foliage nearby. His outline is clear to us. There he go, right over there. Boom Shika wants you to view the world, and this is funny because she wants you to view the world the way the deer do. Make the tigers easier to sneak up on your ass. Meanwhile, they themselves are like the langur. They can see the nuances. Now, they don't like to describe it very well, and that's why when they talk, I would tell you in a nutshell, you should listen to a woman's articulacy, and if she's inarticulate, don't talk to her. She's saying like every other word, don't talk to her. Now, she's using like as a preposition of comparison, or she's using it as a verb for prefer, then that's different. But when they just use like unnecessarily every other word, that bitch is inarticulate. What are you doing messing with her? You as a man don't get to talk like that and then get some pussy. You don't. If you talk like that, they start thinking, okay, that sounds weak. Now, if you're rich and you talk like that, you're a rapper. Within you sound perfectly stupid because now you sound dumb, but you got money. At least they hope you do. Or maybe you're not even that wealthy, but you sound dumb as hell, but you got some social capital and you might get that money through fame. So then they'll give it a pass. But you be, like I said, you be non-stereotypical. You ain't even rapping. And you talk like that. Then, I mean, like, okay, see, now you just sound like you're hemming and hawing, fence straddling, and you should sound like that. See, when you hear Minnie F. Baby talking, Minnie F. Baby all of a sudden becomes very clear and sure of what she's saying and in her pronunciation when she talks about what she's not going to do and tolerate and suffer with any man, no matter what. You know, the one sitting there talking about how she knew her husband was a simp because he took her with 3 kids. Yeah, that bitch. She spoke articulately. She didn't speak with shame. She didn't use a whole bunch of, I mean, like, she sat up and said, I am not touching a bill, period. And she'll say something completely stupid, but because it's difficult for men, she felt confident saying it. If he really loved me, he won't run into no financial trouble. Bitch, you don't love him and you said it. I hope that man was testing you and had the money and just wasn't going to pay it with your funky ass. And I'm a Muslim. I believe that the financial responsibility is on the man, but I also believe that the woman is not entitled to a lifestyle. She's entitled to not have to financially contribute to. She is not entitled to a particular minimum lifestyle. Not at all. You marry that man, and if he winds up in a chicken coop through no fault of his own, you deal with that. Or you admit that you can't deal with that. You go back to your dad's house, and you tell that man, you know what, it ain't even your fault, but God's testing you, and I can't go through this test with you because I'm a weak bitch. I'm a kid. I'm not an adult. And you shouldn't have married me. And now I can see that. So I'm going back to dad. He'll spoil me. But yeah, that's what you do. Instead of these women to sit and say, I shouldn't have to go through that. God will put anybody through whatever it is that they think they should not have to go through, unless you pay the price to not have to go through it justly. And even then, he might still put you through it. And I thank him for all of the things through which he did not put me. But yeah, I'm telling you, black man, getting into these conversations with them, you'll notice that, or getting into conversations with each other, we have to remember that our articulacy is important. Our literacy is important. This nigg literacy, even amongst men of the black manosphere, has got to go. Some of you support me, and I support you, and I appreciate that. But some of you, when you write my comments, you nigg literate. You slept through English classes in school. Now you writing all over social media. Yeah, you need to go to Quillbot and learn how to write. Niggas don't capitalize, don't punctuate, be using the wrong homophones. And you think you saying something. No, nigga, you undermine any good points you might have made. I'm not just saying it because I'm an English teacher. I'm saying that because I understand a lot of things about human communication that many people themselves don't understand because it happens at a subconscious level. Because I had to learn this stuff to navigate through nigga culture in which we're all hypersensitive about looking like nerds. Because we are ruled by a gynocracy of nasty bitches that even keep decent women hiding in fear. And the nasty bitches are like the langur monkeys that can see. But when they sound the call, they're sounding the call to get some shit started. They're not sounding the call so that the deer can run. It's not an alarm call. It's like, uh-oh, somebody about to fight. Stank pussy ratchet bitches. That's what you're looking at. And we all came up in that. Even when we came up in homes with dads, a few dads in the homes were not allowed to really go against the gynocracy. A lot of it is brainwashing. A lot of men who did mean well weren't aware of what it was they were dealing with. I blame them now, though. I blame them for what they know. That's what Manosphere Hall of Fame and I actually will agree. Whatever role a man played in this and he knew he was playing it, I'm not forgiving that shit. And in order for us to have the conversation about no longer being the negative stereotypes that these bitches want, you're going to have to understand. You're going to have to see it a particular way. You're going to have to know that, and remember as well, you're going to have to know and remember the gentleman. Look, you have to have a clear, you have to choose your words carefully. That's what you're going to have to remember. Not that you have to overthink people's social acceptance of what you're going to say, but rather you have to think about what the definition is going to actually be in the minds of the listener, because we come from a culture that's played around with so many goddamn words for so long that we're dealing with the consequences of that too. Ain't your fault, ain't mine. We were born into this. But in order to get out of the effect of that, that's what we're going to have to do. Pick your words carefully. Pick the definitions carefully. That's what's going to happen from now on. We're going to have to deal with a lot of stuff, ignorant stuff in the culture, including the bullying. I mean, by the old definition. And so it's going to be there. But the bullying according to the old definition. And Omar was right about one thing. We got some youth amongst us that need to be put to sleep permanently. He was right about that. Don't tell him I said that. But that was something that was true a generation ago. The true bullies back then needed to be done away with. A bully hits puberty. What are you? And you know he's a bully? Why is that nigga still alive? High school is not supposed to be what it's degenerated into. And then Dennis Sperling, as smart as he is, got that wrong, talking about bullies serve a purpose. They force the weak to become strong. No, they don't. No, they don't. They do teach harsh lessons, but that's not their purpose. It's not their intent. They're not trying to turn somebody that would otherwise be a victim into someone strong. They are trying to get them killed. Or they're trying to, or keep them alive just so they can keep on bothering them and bothering them for the rest of their lives. They don't stop on their own. And they don't pick someone that they can, they don't even pick large crowds of the kinds of guys that they would bully. They don't do that. They go after someone that is smaller than them and by himself. And that's who they go after. I'm talking about for the physical, the real bullying, according to the old definition of physical bullying. That's who they go after. Now, they might verbally do that according to the same thing, according to the same standards. But we're going to have to stop thinking that bullying is just a normal part of childhood. It's a normal part of childhood if it's not checked by adults. But we're going to have to start removing some of these teens. Kids could probably learn a lesson if their parents beat the shit out of them. But a teen, he done hit puberty. She done hit puberty. They could have kids. No. Body slam that little nigga into a grave. And if it's your kid, you be the one to do it. Move over here. If you have to take out your own son because of something like that, from what I heard years ago, the law don't prosecute you. Blow that little nigga's head off once you can prove that he's bullying. Because we're not the people that can afford this anyway. Don't think that because now you got a good massa in the White House that everything gonna be great for us. He might have extended an olive branch. I don't think we're gonna stay out of his sights for long. Because understand this, white folk ain't gonna stay out this man's sights for long. He's just more focused on somebody else, and he wants us to sit this one out. And I think we should sit it out for other reasons than what he wants. He wants us to sit it out for his convenience. We need to sit this out for our convenience, not his. Well, that's another talk for another day. When it comes down to how the comroonity, which we know was led by the Gynocracy, sits up and tries to shame the very people that they either verbally bullied or physically bullied in youth, we need to shut them out. When you become productive, you start looking for other productive men Not based on whether or not they got bullied, but just based on whether or not they participated in it and fell for that dichotomy. And you shut them out, and you're just like, no, nigga, no. Test the attitudes. Maybe you meet some from the comroonity. Maybe you meet some who come from the Huxtable neighborhoods, and you still need to check their mindset too and see where they at. And this is how you know. This is how you test and find out. You talk about reform, and you see, do they meet that Malcolm X standard or not? Do you have to live that life, that stereotypical negative life, before you can go and stand in front of a crowd of today's youth? And I said it that way intentionally. I'm mocking some folks. In order for them to listen to you and decide to do better? Or do you have the right to stand in front of them and tell them what to avoid when you have avoided it all of your life? You didn't live that stereotypical life. If they think that only the one that lived it first, only the ex-idness, the former idness, is qualified to stand in front of them and tell them to get their minds right, then that nigga ain't met the Malcolm X standard. You block his ass out of your benefits. You don't share a goddamn thing with him. Accept your views. If he can't accept them, that nigga wrong, you right. End of. And that's how that works. That's really how that's the discussion that needs to be had. I got to tell my classmate from high school. We were only classmates for a year. But in his town, a little bit further inland from us, mom was, I think dad was a lawyer, mom was a pastor, or mom was a lawyer and pastor. He came from money. He was pretty much from the Huxtable class of his little small country town. And so he, for whatever reason, he still went the idness route. And he wasn't even a hostile dude like that, but he still went the idness route. He got locked up. He did time in the feds. He did time in Parchment and Angola. He did all that. Last time he was released, he was supposed to be picked up by the feds, but they made a mistake and didn't pick him up at the gate of Angola. He was crossing state lines doing dumb stuff. And they were supposed to pick him up. They didn't. He didn't even know. He went ahead and started working and living honestly. And a few months later, he was given a court date. And he showed up in that court, and judge asked him, okay, listen, how have you been living? What are you doing? He said, I got employment over here, and I wasn't evading anything. I didn't know that they were going to come and pick me up for something like that. And the judge said, okay, listen, you'll stay free for now. Since you've been productive and you've reformed for the most part, you will stay free for now. That's what wound up being the case with him. He did turn his life around. He did decide, I'm not doing this dumb stuff no more. But he also said, once I decided to turn everything around, it wasn't us that gave me a chance. It was them white folk. And I got to go back and tell him, look, I know why that's the case. I don't like it. I just know what it is. And here's what it is, man. You came from the Huxtables. You didn't have to do this stuff. And see, we black folk, while we have a lot of class compression, we do still also know the difference a little bit more than the white folk do. So if the white folk that gave you a chance probably didn't realize you came from the Huxtable class. Or they may have thought that if you did, you didn't have the opportunities to stay in the Huxtable class, and they would have been right about that. But when it comes to us, although we're more class compressed than even white Americans are, the fact remains that we still know the difference between our classes more. And that's why our people are looking and saying, why did you do it in the first place? You didn't have to. Some of them are thinking that you might have done this dumb stuff because, forget a financial need to do it, you did it because you wanted to, or because you wanted to prove something. And that's why many of them had a fear of giving you another chance. I don't agree with that assumption. I just know the logic behind it. I got to go back and tell him this, because he was a victim of that mindset that he had to be an itness, that he was coming up Huxtable in a small town where he pretty much the only Huxtable there. His family the only Huxtables around, and he had to be a real N-word. And in order to do that, he had to do dumb shit that his friends were doing who didn't have the same opportunities he had growing up. And just when he was supposed to go to college, first time he got caught. That's what the hell happened. And that's part of why I'm looking at us and I'm saying now we're going to have these discussions like we're doing, and we're right for moving in the right direction and saying, you know what, man, shuck this fit. We're not trying to be ignorant no more. We're not trying to follow that ignorant ass, jigaboo ass, porch monkey ass culture anymore. Old Tarzan chasing ass culture. But when we come across difficulties in the discussion, we have to remember that the difficulties are oftentimes due more so to just the difficulties are due more so to just the definitions and how they've changed over the generations, either in complete meaning at all or in the severity of what they were referring to. And that we ourselves are going to have to recognize more nuance. And that's why I was appreciative of when BGS explained his own views as juxtaposed to Game Changers. And I didn't hear what Game Changers said, so this isn't to knock him, but I did appreciate that BGS said that, you know, if what you mean by being, he said, if what you mean by being a nerd is in general being smart and learning and studying, then yeah, it was that. But it doesn't mean you got to be socially awkward. Doesn't mean that. And so, therefore, we're not going to go that route of assuming that I'm not really bookish and educational because I'm not socially awkward. And BGS ain't socially awkward. That man, no, he ain't nothing socially awkward about him. No, he done said some things that scared the hell out of me, I ain't gonna lie. But there's nothing socially awkward about the man. I mean, hell, he can, with his voice alone, he needs to be the next voice actor for the Mufasa character when they redo The Lion King for the fourth time. But that's another topic for another day. Don't tell BGS that I'm sitting up here giving him compliments, though. You know, it might make his head explode. He might, what, Jet Black complimenting people? No. But we do have to have that nuance. And it's good that he introduced that, and hopefully we will utilize that correctly. Nuance. We will explain better what we mean and what we don't mean. And those will be two different things. Because what we're really trying to do, and we're aware that we're trying to do this, we know we're trying to do this, we're really trying to free ourselves from Boom Shika and Bon Quisha's notions that that you have to either be this knuckle dragging, gun toting, stereotypical niggerilla, or you're a dork dweeb that can't even say hello to people and don't know how to talk to people, and right off the bat, automatically, you sound effeminate when you get to speaking. There's this notion of what I would call talking white, and I don't think there is such a thing, it does exist, but I don't think people understand what the hell that means. I think a lot of us don't get it, man. A lot of us think that what that means is, we make this mistake of thinking it means that you're speaking correctly. No. Now, you speak all high-pitched and nasally, yeah, come on, that's not how we sound unless we got sinus issues. And I got sinus issues and don't sound like that, so that's fake. That is. Without a sinus problem, that's not us. I don't even think that that's really, truly the ones with whom we associate that. But that's their business, not mine. I don't care about them. By the same token, being able to use words with the proper meaning, being able to use different languages, knowing the roots, being able to communicate effectively without a whole bunch of you know what I'm saying, fillers that don't mean a goddamn thing. That's ridiculous. That's not, the absence of that ignorant nigger shit is not a valid reason to sit up and say that somebody's talking white. And it's not to say somebody said, you feel me? And he was wrong for that either. I'm not saying that makes him a knuckle dragging mouth breather. I'm not saying that. But did he say anything? Did he explain his point clearly before he asked the question? If somebody can explain it and then say, can you dig it? Or the modern day equivalent, you feel me? Then it makes perfect sense. But we have people from amongst us that are inarticulate and nigliterate. They can't explain it with their voice, and they can't explain it with a keyboard or a pen on some paper by any definition. And they want to say that they don't talk white, so they're being discriminated against. You motherfucking right, we're discriminating against you, and it ain't because of what you don't talk like, it's because you don't talk. This is the nuance with which we have to understand it. I want this conversation to be productive. I really do. And I'm glad that we're moving in the direction we're moving, and that we absolutely are right about the direction in which we're moving. No more letting these hybristomaniac monkey bitches determine what's a real man according to them, and what's a real man and what's not. According to them, according to anybody but us. We don't let them determine that anymore. We can recognize real womanhood in them. They don't get a right to make a determination as to what real manhood is in us. If they can recognize it, fine. But for them to determine it, they'll always screw things up when we start to give them that option. It'll always be that. Every single time you let them determine that, it's going to come to a negative end. Because what does Westernisha want? We already know. Especially the sister from Westernisha. You know what she wants. She wants one man for the ding-a-ling, and he's screwing everybody else too. And then she wants a bunch of other men for all the non-sexual stuff. One is, and the second one is even more insulting than the first. But yeah, let's get the definitions right as best we can. Stay going in the same direction, but let's work on how we will explain it. And I'm pretty sure that conversation is going to go real far. And then when you find somebody that found a really good way to explain something, spread it. I hope that what I said is a benefit. As always, thanks for listening to Black Heart, Black Mind, Blackout, Assalamu Alaikum, Black Heterosexual, Non-Select Male Power because they don't like it, and Black Patriarchy until extinction to Judgment Day. Thanks for flying with us again here on Jet Black Airways, where the phrase Jet Black's also a verb. Keep Jet Black with us till the wings and the wheels fall off. Gender, justice forever.